Within my 1904 edition of Wealth of Nations, published by Grant Richards, 48 Leicester Square, London, there is a transcription error which does not concur with the Ward, Lock and Company, New York, Bond Street edition with notes by J.R. McCulloch. Within the Grant Richards edition is referred to the introductive powers of labour. Within the Ward, Lock and Co. edition, this is the productive powers of labour. The latter make more sense because the former don't. I don't have at hand or access to one of the first editions of Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations to check which word is correct, but I predict that productive powers of labour is accurate. This pertains to the following quote from Book 2, Chapter 2 of Money. The machines and instruments of trade, etc., which compose the fixed capital, bear this further resemblance to that part of the circulating capital which consists in money, that as every saving in the expense of erecting and supporting those machines, which does not diminish the productive powers of labour, is an improvement of the neat revenue of the society. So every saving in the expense of collecting and supporting that part of the circulating capital which consists in money is an improvement of exactly the same kind. End quote. This is an inference to the effect of, as an equally good tractor, if not a better one, might be bought for the same price, likewise, the advancement in systems of banking which reduce the expenses for these banking services, e.g., electronic banking making bank clerks redundant, just like when the farmer purchases an equal quality tractor by a cheaper price, when costs are reduced within the banking systems, banking services become cheaper. And this enables businesses which use those banking services to be more efficient, as their costs will be less for using these banking services. With fewer expenses, by more efficient and cheaper banking services, the previous expense for the factory owner in banking might become converted to profit for himself or his shareholders. Within the same chapter, Smith said, "The substitution of paper in the room of gold and silver money replaces a very expensive instrument of commerce with one much less costly and sometimes equally convenient." End quote. He said, "There are several different sorts of paper money, but the circulating notes of banks and bankers are the species which is best known, and which seems best adapted for this purpose. End quote. When Smith says this purpose, he means that something expensive, such as transactions of gold and silver, are replaced by something cheaper, such as transactions of paper money. When I say expensive and cheaper, I mean the expenses in ledgers at the bank, the expenses of record keeping, the expenses of clerks to be employed to do these things, the weighing of the gold and silver, the verification that it contains an amount which is faithful to that which is portrayed. Is the gold of a known purity, and can that purity be ascertained when the precious metal has already been mixed with a base metal? A debtor of a commercial bank is somebody who has borrowed money from the bank, i.e., hopefully a person who has the means of generating a viable and substantial profit out of which this debt can be repaid. Profit is generated by enterprise. A creditor of the commercial bank is somebody who has lent money to the bank. These creditors are people whom have invested in the bank, i.e., its shareholders. From their investment, the bank buys its reserves in gold and silver coins, which it keeps in its coffers. Let us say that this bank has in its reserves £20,000 in gold and silver. The bank issues notes to the extent of £100,000, which a particular banker lends among his customers. I quote, "As those notes serve all the purposes of money, his debtors pay him the same interest as if he had lent them so much money. This interest is the source of his gain." End quote. So the debtor, who is the entrepreneur who has borrowed these promissory notes, receives promissory notes which entitle him or anybody else to whom he pays these promissory notes to go to the bank and demand payment in gold or silver coin for the amount which is written on these promissory notes. I quote, "Though some of those notes are continually coming back upon him for payment, part of them continue to circulate for months and years together." End quote. He in this case is the banker. The banker's notes are continually coming back upon the banker for payment, and part of these notes continue to circulate for months and years together. Because the demands made upon the bank for the payment of the actual precious metal is only occasional, say within any month less than only 1% of the total paper money issued is returned to the bank for payment, henceforth the gold and silver coin coming toward the bank from the debtors whom are honouring the repayments of their loans is greater than the amount outgoing. So the bank is making a profit by getting more gold and silver coin back than it had before. It is getting back more than it lends. By issuing promissory notes, it is issuing a promise to pay the bearer upon demand the sum of £1, which is the same as writing an IOU for £1, but the bank ultimately is gaining interest upon each IOU it issues, which are to be paid back in full with this interest. This system worked reasonably well provided that the following criteria were met. 1. Not too many of the debtors became bankrupt. 2. The debtors did not fail to meet their repayments. 3. There was not a run on the bank, whereby it was perceived by the public in general that the bank would not be able to pay out the coin as precious metal. 4. The bank did not issue paper money worth more than 5 times it had as gold and silver within its treasuries. If the bank, being run by scatterbrained management, would lend to enterprises which would not have in the end generated sufficient profits, then the banker would be issuing paper money, which is called the principal debt, the main amount of which would never be repaid, never mind the interest. When this happened, and Smith explained that it did, the consequences upon the country, the society, and the nation were graver than those of a mere run upon the bank. Recall that the circulating currency, which is money, always gravitates toward stock, which employs people who perform industry using this stock. This postulate is always the case, no matter how many misconceived economists from the 20th century delude themselves otherwise. Just say the total stock of England had room for 1,000,000 gold sovereigns. That is, the 1,000,000 gold sovereigns would gravitate toward this type of stock, which produces vendible commodities profitably, and not the other way around. If each commercial bank never issued a total of more than 5 times the amount of precious metal it kept within its coffers, then all would be well and good, because for an amount in their coffers of £200,000, an amount of £1,000,000 of paper money would become circulated. This would enable £800,000 within the national circulation and private savings of people to be sent primarily abroad as foreign investments, or alternatively to import goods from abroad to be consumed domestically. There was no space for this £800,000 within the domestic circulation, so the price of gold may have fallen slightly at this time before gold left the country, it being worth more abroad. If and when any of the commercial banks were lax in predicting critically future prospects, then there would be more paper money in circulation than stock which was capable of generating a profit. After the £800,000 of gold had been sent abroad for investment, the holder of paper money, finding no suitable opportunities to invest in stock profitably domestically, and being unable to send this paper money abroad, would demand payment in precious metal coin at the commercial bank in order to send the gold in the coin abroad for foreign investments. Gold would leave the country, resulting in a shortage of gold sovereigns within England. So the Bank of England would now have to buy gold, often from abroad, where it cost more because it was not in surplus there. It was being used as circulating money. I quote, by issuing too great a quantity of paper, of which the excess was continually returning, in order to be exchanged for gold and silver, the Bank of England was for many years together obliged to coin gold to the extent of between £800,000 and £1,000,000 a year, or at an average about £850,000. End quote. I quote, the Bank of England, it is to be observed, by supplying its own coffers with coin, is indirectly obliged to supply the whole kingdom, into which coin is continually flowing from those coffers in a great variety of ways. End quote. Coin is continually flowing toward the kingdom from the coffers of the bank. I quote, it was the newest, the heaviest, and the best pieces only, which were carefully picked out of the whole coin, and either sent abroad or melted down. End quote. I quote, the Bank of England, notwithstanding their great annual coinage, found, to their astonishment, that there was every year the same scarcity of coin as there had been the year before, and that, notwithstanding the great quantity of good and new coin which was every year issued from the bank, the state of the coin, instead of growing better and better, became every year worse and worse. Every year they found themselves under the necessity of coining nearly the same quantity of gold as they had coined the year before, and from the continual rise in the price of gold bullion, in consequence of the continual wearing and clipping of the coin, the expense of this great annual coinage became every year greater and greater. End quote. I quote, "Whatever coin, therefore, was wanted to support this excessive circulation both of Scotch and English paper money, whatever vacuities this excessive circulation occasioned in the necessary coin of the kingdom, the Bank of England was obliged to supply them. The Scotch banks, no doubt, paid all of them very dearly for their own imprudence and inattention, but the Bank of England paid very dearly not only for its own imprudence, but for the much greater imprudence of almost all the Scotch banks." End quote.